KFT. Welcome to Brian Lehrer Live. We're here every Wednesday night at 7:30. Tonight, we were going to have a Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa special, but instead, we'll devote almost a full hour to, of course, the transit strike, with a little Hugo Chavez cheap heating oil for people in the Bronx and some questions about the new Yankee Stadium thrown in for good measure. But here we are now 2 days into the first New York City transit strike in 25 years, and if there was any novelty to it yesterday, it certainly wore off today. Do you support the transit workers? Call us at 212-251-0801. Should the MTA fire the transit workers like Ronald Reagan fired the air traffic controllers when they went out on an illegal strike way back when? 212-251-0801. And we'll save some lines for anyone who is a transit worker, if any of you happen to be watching right now, 212-251-0801. My first guest is Clyde Haberman, Metro columnist for the New York Times. Hi, Clyde. Thanks a lot for walking in.
Walking in, indeed.
Very good. I'm proud of you. This afternoon, the union president, Roger Toussaint, and then a string of other union presidents urged the MTA to simply take the pension question off the table, and we know that's the central issue in the strike. Do you think they have the basis of a settlement there that will get them back to work by just asking that the whole issue be delayed to some other day?
It's possibly a basis, but you also have the mayor and, more importantly, the governor saying we're not going to begin any negotiations until you stop the strike. And so far you have these two sides dug in, and somebody's going to have to blink first on this.
Who do you think is going to blink?
Oh, who knows? I hate predicting, but I think that blink, when it comes, is going to be at least a few days off. I think we're in through Christmas and maybe, for all I know, beyond New Year's.
Really? Well, if the Transit Workers Union keeps striking for just another 2 days, they're going to bankrupt themselves. Because as I understand it, they only have $3.5 million worth of assets. The fines that they're going to incur if they're upheld on appeal in court will be $1 million a day. So,
and that's arguably a reason for prolonging the strike, because once you're broke, you're broke. You can't be double broke. So once they're out of money, then where's the loss for the union itself? As for the individual workers, clearly they're going to be losing 2 days' pay for every day they're on strike through fines and being docked their regular pay. That could be very, very painful, but that may also feed a "we're not going to be bullied" response.
You know, yesterday when I saw the mayor say, we'll only negotiate, or you should only be able to negotiate after you end the strike, I thought, okay, they're playing good cop, bad cop. The mayor can say that because he's actually not at the bargaining table. The MTA and by extension the governor are. And so I thought, okay, he's sounding like a tough guy. He's setting the MTA up to look reasonable so they can negotiate an end to the settlement. But then today when I heard the governor say the same thing, who really does control the MTA, I thought, well, maybe now they're really out to bust the union.
Well, I don't know if they're out to bust the union, but they each has his own agenda. Look, the governor's running for president. The governor's not going to want to look like to his Republican constituency that he's caving into a union that has committed an illegal action. The mayor, and this is where I think the union has gambled wrong, because this is not 1966 with a brand new John Lindsay as mayor and a veteran Michael Quill.
When there was a transit strike.
When there was the very first transit strike that lasted 12 days. This is a mayor who just won with 60% of the vote. He's not up for re-election. He doesn't have a history of union bargaining in his own company. There's no reason to believe that he's anything but fully ingenuous in this.
Let's take a look at some of the rhetoric being used by each side. And first, here is Mayor Bloomberg.
Roger Toussaint and the TWU have shamefully decided that they don't care about the people they work for and that they have no respect for the law. The leadership of the TWU has thuggishly turned their backs on New York City and disgraced the noble concept of public service.
saying thuggishly has gotten the mayor into a lot of hot water with the union and some of their supporters, but that was Mayor Bloomberg speaking yesterday. Here is how Union President Roger Toussaint responded.
It's unfair that the mayor would characterize dedicated public servants who move 7 million passengers a day as selfish, greedy, and so forth.
You know, we got a lot of calls, Clyde, on my radio show this morning.
About thuggish.
About thuggish,
Yeah.
saying it had racial connotations
Yeah,
and was offensive for that reason.
It may or may have gone a bit far on that, but, you know, we have a story tomorrow I saw that deals with the race issue. But some of the people who are raising this race issue are to some degree the usual suspects. They're sort of professional racialists like City Councilman, former Black Panther, Charles Barron, and Herbert Daughtry. I think to the degree that people are angry at the union, I don't think they're angry at the union because they're largely black and Latino. They're angry because they're walking 5 miles to work. That's
But
really
on the other
issue.
hand, you have the MTA leadership personified by Peter Calico,
Right.
who is just the very picture of a white man with white hair and a camel-haired coat, real estate mogul, who doesn't sound... in fact, I think, why does Mayor Bloomberg and why does Governor Pataki go before the cameras? Because Peter Calico, the head of the MTA, makes such a bad impression and looks so out of touch
Right.
with the lives of these workers who, you know, breathe in oil fumes all day long.
Peter Calico, you know, almost ran the New York Post into the ground when he owned it briefly. Peter Calico, I've criticized him in several columns, is not exactly your best public spokesman. There's no question, and that's probably one reason why he's not out there. Nonetheless, my own point of view is that from the rider's point of view, and as a daily rider of the subways, my feeling is that in the end, we're not dealing with a company called the MTA or the city or the state. We're dealing with us, the taxpayers and fare payers of the city. And both the union, both the MTA work for us. And at the moment, we're walking. And a lot of people don't like it.
But it does confront us with a fundamental question, then, which is, what do we think is fair to pay our employees? And we may not feel like employers, but of course, as you point out, we are with our tax dollars.
We are.
But do we want to take somebody who lays track, who's a grease monkey breathing in all this stuff for 25 years to age 55 and tell him that he has to retire now at 62 or the next one's to come along? I don't know the answer to that.
Well, that's off the
but
table,
that's
the
the
62.
question.
62 is off the table. And the question is not only what happens to the guy who's breathing in the dust. There are also an awful lot of desk sitters in the TWU. That it also has to deal with what's affordable. And as people have said on your show, and as you've raised questions yourself on your morning radio show, we're living longer. The question is, how far do we pay to people who are going to live 30, 35 years beyond their retirement?
And the pensions are going to balloon and balloon
All
and
the rest of
balloon.
that. I think this issue, whether it's off the table or not in the next couple of days, is with us now in as graphic a way as possible, and now it's something we're all going to have to wrestle with for quite a while.
It's a national issue in the public sector
Absolutely.
and the private sector, for us as employees, for us as taxpayers, and we're really confronted with it through this. You're right. Bob in Manhattan, thank you for calling Brian Lehrer Live. You're on the air.
More than 40 blocks away from my place of work. But the union basically got most of what they wanted when the MTA moved off age 62 and went to 55, because that's 7 more years of pension payments. They only wanted a 4% increase in the contribution rate. So if you work 25 years, 4% a year is 100%. So in exchange of having 7 more years of half pay, your contributions would be 1 year's salary, which means it's 2 out of the 7 years, which means they got 5/7 of what they were bargaining for.
Right. Now, the only, and if those numbers are confusing, maybe I'll confuse you even more by saying that the 4 percentage points per year more that they want the new employees to contribute to the pension funds, which is at the moment is the make or break issue. It's only for 10 years.
Right.
It's not for their whole 25.
Exactly.
But it's still a big pay cut for people who are coming in as new workers.
And although one could argue that would be consistent with the pay cut that new police officers have taken, that whole principle has already been agreed to by several municipal unions. And so that cat's out of the bag. Now, whether or not it's a fair cat and a fair bag is arguable, but that one is you know, to use another cliche, you know, that toothpaste's out of the tube.
Karen in Far Rockaway, you're on the air. Thank you for calling.
Good evening. I would just like to say that y'all all misconstruing the whole topic.
How so?
Because y'all don't have the numbers correctly, and furthermore, the MTA was not supposed to put the package on the contract with the pension thing. It's illegal for them to do that, and they knew that was illegal at the last minute when Calico did it.
Karen, can I ask you, are you a transit worker?
Yes, I am.
What do you do?
I'm a station agent. We used to be called railroad clerks.
Right. Used to be called token booth clerks, right?
Token booth clerk, then railroad clerk, now station agent.
Right.
They're putting us outside now. But that's not what I want to say. I want to talk to you about everything that we've been hearing in the news the last few days. That y'all are all one-sided. The New York Times man as well. The only fair, well, we don't even have a fair article in the news at all these last 3 days.
What do you think is the
everything is one-sided. It's nothing for labor. Let me finish talking.
Go ahead.
There's nothing for labor.
What's the important thing for people to know?
The public doesn't understand, but we are a union, and this city was fought hard for jobs with unions. That's what it was all about. And the struggle was the only ones we took up the struggle because everybody else is scared to strike because we under the Taylor law. But the other people who just took the two packages from the mayor in the past spring, they didn't want that, but they were scared.
Karen, I'm going to give you one more word. Karen, what's the core?
We went over the line to do the strike because we fighting for what is right for us and other people in other unions also throughout the country, not just New York.
And is the main issue to you pensions?
Yes, the pension is very much a part of what we're talking about. That's why we rejected it, because the pension should not be put up to 62 because none of us live that far, and they just want the people to die off so they never collect the pension.
Karen, thank you for your call. There is, Clyde, we got to go, but there is an issue of the life expectancy of transit workers, which I hear from transit workers, and I haven't seen public health data, is not all that long after they retire compared to other people.
Well, I doubt they're all dying before the age of 62.
Clyde Haberman, New York Times Metro columnist, thank you for being our first voice tonight. Our Transit Strike Day 2 special continues in a minute with City Council Transportation Committee Chairman John Liu. This is Brian Lehrer Live.
Some of New York's most admired figures don't sell out concerts. There'll never be a running back for the Giants. And they probably won't go platinum. But to millions of kids, their teachers are still the biggest heroes in the world. Join New York's brightest. Teach NYC.
Prominent professors, outstanding students, illustrious alumni, all on the Emmy-nominated magazine show about CUNY. Hi, I'm Vianora Vinca. Join us this Sunday when we'll bring you the stories about people and programs that make CUNY a place where you study with the best.
This is Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live every Wednesday night at 7:30. Tonight we're devoting almost a full hour to the latest on the transit strike and the issues underlying it. Joining me now is City Councilman John Liu. He's the chair of the Transportation Committee and represents Northeast Queens. Councilman Liu, welcome. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Thanks for doing this show. It's really critical.
How'd you get here?
I drove from City Hall, and but that's not how I've been able to get to City Hall from home.
We're on live right now. How's the traffic from City Hall up here to 34th and 5th?
It took 45 minutes.
Ooh, not good.
Yeah.
So does the City Council have a role to play in this dispute?
The City Council doesn't have any direct authority over the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. Arguably, nobody does except Governor Pataki. But we're elected officials, elected to represent our constituents, and our constituents are angry as, well, they're angry, very angry that the buses and subways are not running. I represent Flushing, which is a major transit hub, and the impact on that area has been extremely marked.
So would you say that your constituents are angrier at the transit workers or at the MTA?
People in my area and all across New York are very angry that the buses and subways are not running. Some people are upset about the situation at the workers, and some people understand that the situation is with the MTA. And so I think that it's not helpful to figure out, well, whose responsibility is it at this point? I mean, we're already 2 days in with no end in sight. What is important is for everybody to get back to the negotiating table and resolve this crisis. We need to get those buses and subways rolling again.
We saw two things this afternoon. We saw Mayor Bloomberg and Governor Pataki seem to say that there will be no negotiations with the union until after they end the strike and go back to work. And then we saw the union president, Roger Toussaint, go on television and say he's proposing that they simply take the pension issue off the table for now. Then they'll go back to work, and they'll save the pension discussion for another day when cooler heads can prevail. Do you think that Roger Toussaint has the basis of a settlement of the strike in that proposal?
I think it's a very logical basis. I think what's most important is let's do whatever we can, short of giving away $1 trillion, to get the buses and subways rolling again. And if the workers are saying that, well, let's get back to the table and take this one issue out of the deal for now, let's do it. Let's have the buses and subways rolling tomorrow. Well, it's going to take some time for the MTA to get the trains back on the tracks, literally. But we could have it as early as midday tomorrow. There should be nothing that stops us from doing that.
Let's take a phone call. Here's another transit worker calling in. This is Richard in Hunts Point, a train operator. Thanks a lot for calling. You're on the air.
Yeah, how you doing? Good evening. My point to you is that the news media, it seems, is one-sided, like the other caller said before, okay? The truth of the matter is that people don't really know the truth. And the last contract,
Go ahead, turn your television off, okay? The television's on a delay, so turn the television off and just speak into the phone. All right, I'm going to give you a second to do that, or I'm going to have to move on. Are you there? All right, I guess we lost him. Did we lose him? I guess we lost him. All right, Councilman Liu, let me ask you, does the MTA not have a point on the underlying pension issue when they say if we don't do something about reducing pension costs, they're going to continue to explode, and as Clyde Haberman, the previous guest, said, we, the taxpayers, are the employers in this case.
Sure.
And so it's going to be more and more and more and more. And so with people living longer today, there's really no choice but for future workers to have a lower pension guarantee than current workers. What do you think about the argument?
Regardless of the merits or substance of that argument, there may be merit, there may be substance in it. The fact is, this deadline, December 15, 2005, had been known about for 3 years. The MTA knew all along that this contract is potentially difficult to resolve. Why then did it not even start negotiations in earnest until less than 2 weeks before the deadline? If they had started earlier, there would have been more time to flesh this out, including in the public mind. And if the public ultimately decides that, well, it's probably not worth taxing the public even more to pay for these costs, the high costs of these pensions, then fine, so be it. But there should have been some discourse about it. The problem is that the MTA completely mismanaged the whole process. They did not come to the table until it was virtually too late. They blew $1 billion surplus without working with their so-called partners in this.
Rosemary, it's Rosalie. Rosalie in Brownsville. Hi, you're on the air. Thanks for calling.
Hello?
Hi, you're on the air. And turn your television off, okay? Listen to me on the phone. Turn the sound of your television off because there's a delay, all right?
All right.
And go ahead.
Can I talk now?
Yes, you can.
Yes. You know, in my opinion, I think a race has a lot to do with it. And how dare Mayor Bloomberg call us a bunch of thugs?
Do you think that's a racial remark?
Yes, it is.
Why is thug a racist term? Why doesn't that connote, you know, an Italian mafia member or any other kind of thug?
Excuse me?
I say, why doesn't the term thug strike you as racially neutral? That could be referring to an Italian mafia member or any kind of thug.
Most of these transit workers are African American and Latinos.
Now, when he says thug, he believes he means you're thugs because you're breaking the law, and that's what thugs do. So speak to our viewers and tell them why they should support an illegal strike, what the mayor today called a selfish illegal strike.
Why? Well, I don't think they're being selfish. I really don't, and I'm really with the workers because I really think they deserve to get whatever it is they're asking for, and I don't think they're being unreasonable.
And does it bother you, does it worry you that if they get what they're asking for, the pension costs that you as a taxpayer are going to pay will explode as the years go on?
No, it doesn't.
Why?
Because it doesn't bother me.
Okay, Rosalie.
Well, maybe I can.
Thank you for your call. Go ahead,
if I may,
Councilman.
Brian. First of all, you raise a good question, and that's something that's not going to be able to be answered before we get the buses and subways rolling again. But the issue of race in the big picture of what's going on here, I don't think it can be ignored. And I think that's something that has to be a topic of public discussion in the coming months and perhaps years.
What role does race play in this dispute?
Well, I think that if you look at, you know, we're talking about a very large workforce. We're talking about a significant number of the people who are in power. And if you look at the disparities, I think it's pretty obvious. But again, you know, we're not going to be able to resolve this now. The immediate question is, let's get the buses and subways rolling again. They can be back in service tomorrow. I think in this case, Roger Toussaint has made a very reasonable offer. There's no reason why now the mayor and the governor have to seem so tough that, you know, they've already showed that they're macho cowboys. That's enough. Now let's get the buses and subways rolling again, then resolve the pension issue and finish the contract.
City Councilman John Liu, head of the Transportation Committee, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
We'll see what happens. My next guest is Bronx Borough President Adolfo Carrion. And President Carrion, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Hello.
Delighted to be with you, Brian. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you, under the circumstances. Now, as the president of the Bronx and a frequently mentioned possible candidate for mayor yourself in 2009, who do you support in this strike?
Well, you know, I have joined the workers and called on the MTA to negotiate in good faith. I thought it was important for the conflict to be resolved before this decision to go on strike. I think there is an obvious reason why police and firefighters and emergency service workers and teachers and transit workers should not go on strike and by law are disallowed from going on strike, because obviously it wreaks havoc in our city and in any city across this country. It becomes a public safety and public health concern. It cripples the economy. We're a few days before Christmas, and here we are, people walking to work, walking over bridges. The roads are jam-packed. People are trying to find, ways of getting into strangers' cars to get to work. It's delaying everything. This is not good for us. And so, you know, I think it is critical, and I said it the other day to another reporter on Fox 5, I do think that the mayor and the governor have a role to play. Certainly the governor with his appointments to the MTA board, he has an absolute role to play. He can call the parties to the table as the leader of this great state and say, folks, you need to be here, and you need to resolve this conflict immediately.
In fact, I wonder how you think the mayor is doing and how you think the governor is doing. You said the governor could call everybody to the table, but in fact the governor went on television today and said he thinks there should be no negotiations until after the union ends the strike. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I certainly believe that the negotiations need to happen immediately. I saw Roger Toussaint today at a press conference where he said, you know, if we take this new retirement tier off the table, we're willing to come back. Look, the fact of the matter is that when you're the chief executive, you need to uphold the law. You have a responsibility to call people to obey the law. You have a responsibility to the general public. Obviously, they've taken a hard position to say, obey the law, and then negotiations can resume.
Do you think that if you were the mayor, you would be taking any less hard a line than Mayor Bloomberg is doing, going on television every day and calling them selfish and calling the strike illegal, and for that matter, calling them thugs?
Well, certainly I don't think there's room in the public discourse for calling people thugs, and the name-calling shouldn't be part of this. But certainly it is the responsibility of the executive to call on people to uphold the law and to protect the interest of all the people of the city, the economy of the city, the security of the city. And so, you know, I think he's doing his job. I don't think I would do anything differently in terms of insisting that the trains run and that the schools work and that the police and the emergency service workers obey the law and do what they have to do. I am concerned at the way that the MTA has been so terribly arrogant in how they deal with this group of workers, and the fact that it's a public record now that they have run two sets of books. The people's faith has been tested. They have failed that test. You know, they were claiming a deficit, a deep deficit at the beginning of the year. If you remember last February, they were saying they were in crisis and were running out of money. And then 9 months later, there's a $100 million surplus. The surplus now balloons to $1 billion.
Mr. Carrion, let me ask you if you think that they were lying about the projected deficit, or if they just had an uptick in the real estate market, which is what they think. I think they're explaining as to the way it happened. That was unexpected. Congress has also seen better revenues at the federal level than they expected this year. And the MTA says if they give away some of this surplus to the workers in terms of an additional percentage raise, then this is money that they're not going to have down the line. This is a one-time surplus, and then they can't afford it without raising fares for the rest of us if it's going to be part of the base pay year after year after year and keep going up by a percentage each year. Is that not an accurate statement by them?
Well, I think it's accurate when you can argue that this is a one-time surplus, or it has a limited life, and you can't rely on it, and so you can't use the entirety of that surplus to increase pay and load your regular budget with it. However, you know, just a month and a half ago, just about, they come out with this kooky notion of giving these the holiday Metro cards and giving several $100 million away, which really, you know, after their credibility problem with the books that they've run, it's very difficult to know whether or not the MTA is telling the truth or not. The fact is that, you know, revenues are up in a lot of areas, you know, in the economy. But we cannot rely on the MTA's word, especially, you know, in the heat of negotiations when the transit workers say, give us 24%. a 24% increase, and continue giving us generous benefits, or make them more generous.
President Carrion, let me jump in, and I think I get that point, and our viewers get that point. We keep hearing about the dignity of the working class transit workers versus the suffering of working class New Yorkers who can't get to their jobs. Is it more working class solidarity to support the union or oppose the union, in your opinion?
Well, you know, I have to tell you, from what I hear in the streets right now, people are suffering, and I also, you know, I'm starting to hear the comments out there that, look, you know, we're really suffering. The average worker out here is not making the kind of money that some of these workers are making, and so they're starting to feel the pinch. They do have a sense of solidarity. There is a sense that workers are not always treated fairly, but people are suffering, and there's a reason why. There's a clear reason why certain workers are barred from striking, and it has to do with far bigger reasons like safety, security, the economy, the ability for us to continue to work as a society.
By the way, do you think it was a racist remark of the mayor to call the strikers thugs?
You know, I think only Michael Bloomberg knew what he was thinking when he said that. I think it was irresponsible for him to use that language so loosely, and I hope that he would come back and say exactly what he meant.
My guest for another few minutes, the president of the Bronx, Adolfo Carrion. And while you're here, I want to ask you briefly about another couple of issues. One is the new Yankee Stadium proposal. I gather you support a new Yankee Stadium, even though it would mean less parkland for the people who now use McCombs Dam Park, where the new stadium would be built. Is that true?
That's entirely untrue. In fact, Brian, there's a net increase of nearly 5 acres of new parkland, and I am now about 24 hours or less away from presenting my recommendation to the City Planning Commission for how I think they should deal with the land use application related to the development of Yankee Stadium.
Can you give us a little scoop?
Well, I think you'll have to wait on that, but I do support the construction of a new stadium. It's going to create thousands of new jobs, construction jobs, permanent jobs. I will tell you that I will include in my comments to the City Planning Commission concern over creating a central park instead of dispersing the parkland throughout the neighborhood, creating more usable parkland for the kids in that neighborhood, for the Yankees to support directly the maintenance and operation of those parks. We will have more baseball fields for the kids in the neighborhood. We'll have a track and field and ice skating rink and roller rink and a hotel and conference center, a Yankee Hall of Fame and museum. There will be much more economic activity. There will be a year-round attraction for tourists to come to the area. And so the balance will change in terms of the relationship between the Yankees and the host community that for years has, in my mind, been in an imbalance. And so I think there will be a large net benefit for the Bronx as a whole.
And one other question on another topic. The firebrand president of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, is shipping reduced-rate home heating oil, as you know, for some poor people in the Bronx to make a point about President Bush and the disparity between rich and poor in American capitalism. Do you support these shipments from Chavez?
Well, you know, Hugo Chavez has been in a little bit of a contest there with our president, and I guess he in his mind believes he's the new Che or the new Fidel, the new voice for the poor in Latin America, and to some extent he came up that way. As that kind of voice in Latin America. He took on the establishment down there. And, you know, I said back when it first was announced that I thought it was an obvious political statement. They have newfound reserves of oil that now I think it puts them in a stronger position globally. It's going to help his economy. And so it was a good public relations stunt.
Would you like to see American oil companies do the same thing?
I think that American oil companies should take into consideration the fact that energy prices are absolutely going through the roof, and that there are many poor and working families all across this country who just can't afford to keep their homes warm. And if if the profits that they're taking are what's reported, and we understand that they're pretty large, that they are part of the American family and should help the most needy as well. I don't want to comment too much on Chavez, because there's been some local benefit, obviously, to some very needy people here, but it's a political stunt.
Let me ask you one final question, and it's back to the transit strike. You probably heard Roger Toussaint propose today that the MTA simply take the pension issue off the table. They'll come back and negotiate it another day, and he pretty much implied under those circumstances he'll send his workers back to work. Do you think that's the basis of a settlement? I think we're going to get much closer. I disagree with Clyde that it's going to last much longer. I think that when Roger gets to the point where he's making such a public declaration, that there probably have been some behind-the-scenes conversations, and certainly when he suggests that it's illegal for the MTA to take that position, what he's really suggesting is that it is beyond the purview of the MTA, and that it is in the hands of the legislature to change the laws. Right. And so I think everybody's trying to find a graceful out and hold on to their dignity as they possibly come back to the table. Bronx Borough President Adolfo Carrion, thanks so much for coming on with us. Let's hope cooler heads prevail. Amen, brother. Thanks. Take care, Brian. Thanks a lot. Merry Christmas. And joining me now to talk more about the transit strike is Gary Pierre, publisher and editor of the Haitian Times. Hi, Gary. Welcome to Brian Lehrer Live tonight.
Thank you, Brian.
You know, the union leader, Roger Toussaint, is Trinidadian, and I wonder if you think a lot of Haitian New Yorkers relate to him for being a black man from the Caribbean willing to take it to the white power structure. Whoops, did we lose Gary? Hang on, Gary. Let me see if I can get rid of this other call. And there you go. Sorry about that.
Yes, well, Roger is, in fact, a lot of people have been asking, is he Haitian? And, well, he's not, as you mentioned, he's Trinidadian, but his name...
Now, I would think that the Haitians who read your newspaper can tell the difference between a Haitian and a Trinidadian accent. I think even I can tell that.
Well, they do, but there's still a lot to embody him. He's a bit of there's a certain level of a folks hero about him. In fact, as you mentioned, in taking on the establishment, he's been very forceful, very powerful, in the mold of a Haitian named Toussaint Louverture, which was debated somewhat in your show this morning on the radio by former Parks Commissioner Stern. And yes,
right, who's coming on here in a few minutes.
Okay.
But so people relate to Roger Toussaint, or since a lot of the people getting hurt the most are also working class people, including a lot of Haitians, I'm sure, how do you see sympathies lying among your readers in this situation?
Well, I think there's been a lot made about the working class getting hurt. Obviously, I don't think they're the only one getting hurt. You must understand to some extent that a lot of the neighborhoods where my readers live are not well serviced by the transit. And that's why you've had, over the last decade, a proliferation of the delivery vans, the cabs, and also you have another phenomenon that's not often written or talked about in the city. These people who do what they call a route taxi, they just take, for instance, Church Avenue, and they have a regular sedan, and they're just cruising, picking up people. So there's been sort of like an underground transportation movement going on in the city and in the Bronx and Brooklyn and Queens because of the incompetence of the transit. So at some level, yes, of course, everybody is disrupted by this strike, but I think too much is made about so that the working class getting hurt the most. I mean, of course, if the working class cannot get to work, obviously the employer is being hurt as well because that business is not being productive. So we all are in this together in some sense.
Let me take a caller and see if we can get a caller on with you without disconnecting you. I think we did it. Edwin, a bus driver from Queens Village. Hi, you're on the air. Hello.
Hello. How you doing, Brian?
Good, Edwin. Thanks for calling.
About the strike, the thing with MTA, why we had to go out, the private lines has been out of a contract for like 3 years. So has Metro North. And I guess the transit, New York City Transit, wasn't going to take that chance because with the Taylor law, they kind of hold you hostage on, they negotiate for a contract. Why should we wait 2 years for a 3%, 4% raise? It only boils down to about $1,600, $1,500 a year extra on your salary.
Is the pension the main issue for you?
Well, yes, because our pension system is slightly different than theirs. But when it comes, when they take up the private lines in February, that's what you have to worry about.
Right, and yet the strike seems to be taken primarily in the name of people who don't even work for the transit authority yet. It's the two-tier system. It's the degradation of the pension for future workers. So do you have enough solidarity to take this hit, 2 days' pay for every day that you strike as a fine for many days going forward for the interests of people who don't even have employment with the TA yet?
Well, you have to, because we same thing we've gotten now is what Tier 1 and Tier 2 fought for us. Well, we wouldn't have what we have. So it's kind of like if you give in now, they're going to take something from us probably in the future.
All right. Gary Pierre, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Do you want to react to what Edwin is saying?
Well, yeah, I think he makes a very valid point. And we're seeing this situation work itself out at the police department, where the new officers are coming at a lower salary. And I don't think the PBA is really happy about that now. And that's one of the reasons why you see them so involved in the strike. I mean, you've seen Pat Lynch on TV talking all the time and supporting. You see Randy of the teachers union. And I think because of this Taylor law, they wish they could strike, and they couldn't. And this is an opportunity, I think, for labor overall to exert some power vicariously through the transit workers union. I think he's absolutely correct. We call them the unborn, but ultimately they're going to come in. And the city, frankly, is very expensive to live. I think a lot of these transit workers have to live within the 5 boroughs, and if
but Gary, it's a conflict, it's a paradox, because you have the so-called unborn workers who haven't been hired yet, but you also have the unborn taxpayers, some of whom who haven't been born yet, who are going to have to keep paying for these pensions as they get more and more expensive, according to all the actuarial tables, unless there is some cutback.
But, one thing with the MTA, I don't believe their numbers. I mean, last year they had a deficit, and all of a sudden they have $1 billion surplus. I'm not sure. I mean, Alan Hevesy, the state controller, has done all kinds of audits showing some problems. I mean, we've taken his numbers at face value. I don't know if that's the case. I mean, I don't know, because time and time we've been misled by MTA numbers. I mean, that's the reality, and I don't know if that's the case.
Gary Pierre, editor and publisher of the Haitian Times. Gary, always a pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Brian.
Our transit strike Day 2 special continues in a minute with political analyst Doug Musio and former Parks Commissioner Henry Stern. This is Brian Lehrer Live.
What would you do to have a little extra cash in your pocket? Would you fill out your tax forms? Filing your taxes could get you up to $2,000 or even more under the Earned Income Tax Credit.
If you're in between the ages of 24 and 64 and earn less than $12,000 a year, or your family household income is less than $35,000 a year, you could qualify.
For the location of the free EITC filing sites in your area, call 311. Don't let a piece of paper stop you from getting your fair return. For more information, please call 311 or visit nyc.gov/EITC.
It's your money. Come and get it.
take the time to show someone you care. Oh yeah.
Happy holidays.
This is Brian Lehrer Live. We're here every Wednesday night at 7:30, and tonight we're devoting almost a full hour to the latest on the transit strike and the issues underlying it. Here is Mayor Bloomberg talking about the economic consequences of the strike. Oh, no? Okay, we'll get back to Mayor Bloomberg in a minute, and I think we have with us on the line Doug Musio, professor of public affairs at Baruch College and legendary CUNY TV political analyst. Hello, Doug. Okay, there's Doug Musio. Hi, Doug. Now we got you. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
What do you think is at stake politically for Mayor Bloomberg here?
Mayor Bloomberg needs to show toughness and resolve in this. He's staked out a very firm position, and in fact, so firm that he may have helped precipitate this. I think he's got to play hard and continue playing hard.
The mayor has been playing tough guy. He's got no sympathy for the strikers at all. He even said no one before has done anything to purposely hurt the people of the city on his watch. That seems a little extreme to some of our callers tonight. They certainly don't like the fact that he used the word thugs.
Yeah, I thought that was really unfortunate. I mean, these folks are not thugs. They are civil servants. They move 7 million of us a day, and that type of inflammatory language really doesn't help the situation.
And what do you think is at stake politically for Governor Pataki? He has been off campaigning for president of all things in New Hampshire and Iowa during some of the late stages of negotiation before the strike. What's in it for him?
He's been missing in action. I mean, he's showed a total absence of leadership. He's walked away from this as he's walked away from budget problems to enhance his own political career. I think the governor takes another black eye here.
Let me take one phone call for you, and it comes from Ali in Manhattan. Hi, you're on the air.
Hi, Ali, actually.
Ali, I'm sorry.
I feel as if they've made it harder for people to support the strikers by making it harder to get around New York. For example, they closed down 2 avenues for an emergency vehicle, but then they reopened Madison and 5th today with just 1 lane closed. And they could have done things like that from the start, had bus lines going north and south, if not east and west, maybe just 2 on the east and west side of Manhattan. It doesn't seem like they've, for all their complaining about strikers, who I do want to support, difficult as it is, they're not really giving us many alternatives for getting around the city.
Right. And where do your sympathies lie?
I want to sympathize with the strikers. I do sympathize with the strikers, and I feel like too much is put on them, whereas the city government could take on more responsibility helping people like me who don't have a lot of money. And, I mean, my job relies on people coming into the city. I don't have a steady 9 to 5, so as long as the strike goes on, I have no work.
Ali, thank you very much for your call. Well, Doug Musio, you know, it's funny. There's somebody who doesn't have any work, she says, as long as the strike goes on, and yet she's more sympathetic with the strikers. And there was an ABC poll that got released this morning. I think it was a legitimate scientific poll that found 52% supported the strikers, which I think is going to surprise a lot of people in the media.
Well, I mean, the fact is that the MTA is a badly run, badly managed agency that's shoved fare hikes down our throats, misstated surpluses, it kept double books. I mean, you know, it's not easy to sympathize with the MTA given their arrogance and incompetence.
Doug Musio, last thing. Do you think that there is the basis of a settlement in what we heard this afternoon from Roger Toussaint and then from other union leaders in the city, and that is a plea to the MTA to simply take the pension issue off the table for now, and the implication was just push this down the field to another day and they'll go back to work pretty quick?
Well, he's trying to force the ball into the other guy's court again. I don't know. I think they may push the union. If they want to bust the union, this is the time to do it. And I don't know how committed the mayor and the governor and the MTA are to do this. My feeling is that they don't do it, and maybe Toussaint goes to jail, and then who knows?
All right, Doug Musio, political analyst, does a show on CUNY TV that'll be on later tonight, teaches at Baruch College. Thank you very much. And joining me now in our studio is Henry Stern, former Parks Commissioner and now a blogger and head of a think tank called New York Civic. Welcome, Henry Stern.
Thank you.
I know you've been tough on the strikers. And
well,
some of what we've heard tonight has been from the other side, that no one believes the MTA. They had the quote, 2 sets of books problems a few years ago. They predicted a deficit and wound up with a surplus this year. And the MTA does not seem to have a lot of credibility, at least with a lot of people who are inclined to support the union.
It doesn't deserve much credibility. The MTA is poorly led by someone who is simply a personal friend of the governor and his friend. No railroad experience, no professional success. It is a classic case where they used to send these people to be ambassadors to some obscure country. Now they make them head of a transit system. It doesn't work. But the fact that the MTA is inept doesn't excuse people who leave their jobs and inconvenience the public, because there's a law that prevents that. In exchange for security, for, in effect, lifetime tenure, for all the benefits and privileges that they get, they make a commitment not to strike. It's also provided for by law, the Taylor Law, and Taylor was not a reactionary, he was a university professor who was brought into the fair law. Now, the teachers, the police, the firefighters, they all went years. They got their contracts retroactively. They got back pay. They didn't strike and disrupt services.
Right.
These people, their contracts, 2 or 3 days after the contract expires, maybe 3 hours after the contract expires, they're shutting down the system. That's illegal, irresponsible, and it shouldn't be tolerated. And if the mayor and the government say, oh, right, we don't care, they deserve what they get.
We've had transit workers call in tonight who've said, A, the media hasn't been fair to them, and B, that there is no other way for them to have leverage with the MTA because they look at the downgrading of the starting salary that the police took, for example, and they say that the Taylor Law holds them hostage for whatever management wants to impose on them pretty much, unless they actually exercise that defiance to strike.
But that's completely untrue, because if they, for example, couldn't agree on a contract, which is quite possible, they go along under the existing contract. Nobody's salary can be reduced, no pensions be cut. In this case, when management is trying the initiatives of reducing things, it's in the union's interest to stay just where they are, because they know they'll get the retroactive salary when the pension goes through. Instead, through their own internal militancy and through their misguided notions of being liberators of different lands, the messianic attitude, which has been rejected by the president of their own international union, spent 3 hours not to strike. He said it's not only illegal, but it's unwarranted in view of the negotiations. The MTA is going to give away the store anyway in the end. But they insist on rubbing you with a strike. By the way, I want to allude, if you have a minute, to this thug reference. Very often it's one word that captures the imagination in a campaign, like when Fernando Ferrer said about Diallo, and it was murder, it wasn't murder. So we looked up thug, because, let's see what it says. A thug, one of a band of professional assassins formerly active in northern India who worshipped Kali and offered their victims to her. So I guess Kali was a female goddess. And
well, that might have been the original meaning, but you know it has a certain meaning in colloquial use.
When I was a kid, a thug was a guy in the mafia. A thug was, but there was Italian or the Jewish, guy. Recently, it's been any race or any race that commits crimes is a thug. Now, what's happened is that the concept of thug life has been adopted in a way in hip hop and rap and glorified, so that if you called an Italian a thug, he would be offended. And nowadays,
and now an African American is offended, or a Trinidadian.
Well, he's not offended. He's maybe you don't know how he feels.
Let's take a phone call. JD in the North Bronx, you're on the air. Thank you for calling.
Thank you for having me. me. A great show. I want to say first that Councilman Lou would make a great mayor. Second, I want to say that there are a lot of conspicuous absences that I've been hearing different people speak about. But what about the pay raises that the executives receive already from this surplus that they're not trying to share with anyone else? There's this whole thing that I think former Commissioner Stern just mentioned about the private-public aspect of this company that kind of has them accountable to no one, and that's a real issue in this.
Let me get a response.
Well, they're accountable to the governor who appoints Calico and the majority of the members of the MTA. The city should have a much greater voice in the MTA than it does now, considering that most of its income, most of the lines, come in and serve the city. But the city has been screwed ever since 1968, when it didn't want to pay the deficits, and the state stepped in.
We now have the mayor and the governor saying they don't want the MTA to even negotiate with the transit workers until they end the strike. We have the transit workers proposing that they just take the issue of pensions off the table and kick it down the road to another day, and then they'll probably go back pretty quick. Do you see a resolution in either of those positions?
Well, I think this is really an artificial impasse as to who steps forward first, and the obvious solution is obvious. They both go on at the same time. They come back on Monday or whatever day it is, and negotiations begin Monday. I mean, there's an obvious solution to that one. But there is an issue here. There are a lot of wasteful practices in the Transit Authority. There are a lot of rules. There is a lot of overstaffing and duplication, both at the worker level and at the management level. There are 440 lawyers in the MTA, for example.
We just have 30 seconds
They
left.
wasted $300 million on their 2 Broadway buildings.
Now you're making the union's case.
They ought to be cleaned out. But just because the MTA ought to be cleaned out, I'd bring David Gunn back as
former head of the MTA.
Former head of the MTA. Did a terrific job. I'd make Katie Lapp the president, and I'd make Peter Calico the chairman.
But they can't do that before Christmas.
No. But I'd make Mr. Calico the chair emeritus.
Thank you very much, Henry Stern, former Parks Commissioner. And that's it for tonight's Brian Lehrer Live. Did we resolve anything? We are here live every Wednesday night at 7:30. Also join me every weekday morning at 10 for my radio call-in show. That's on WNYC, New York Public Radio. Tomorrow we'll keep covering the transit strike. What else? And take your calls on how you're getting around, as well as on the issues. That's tomorrow morning at 10 on AM 820 and 93.9 WNYC. Until then, have a great night and happy holidays.